Hey guys. Tonight we are going to take a little trip. Not to a battlefield or a king's court, but to a place far more familiar, and in some ways, far stranger. We're traveling back to the spring of 1954, to the misty, optimistic city of Seattle, Washington. And you're not just an observer on this trip, you're already living it. We're going to explore a moment in time when an entire city, for a few bizarre weeks, collectively lost its mind over something you probably look through every single day and never think twice about: your car's windshield. It's a story about how fear can spread faster than any virus, and how reality can bend when enough people start to panic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel more than you know. And as you settle in, drop a comment letting me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in your Seattle neighborhood smells of damp earth and budding cherry blossoms. It's April, 1954. The world feels solid, dependable. The Great War is a memory your parents talk about, and the second one, the one that defined your youth, is nearly a decade in the past. Now, there's a sense of forward momentum in the air, a hum of progress you can feel in the very pavement. You step out of your modest, well-minded kept home. The morning light still soft and grey as it filters through the persistent cloud cover. The ferry horn echoes faintly from Elliott Bay, a sound as regular and comforting as a heartbeat. You're heading to your car, a handsome -stone Chevrolet Bel Air. It's your pride and joy, a gleaming symbol of the new American dream. The chrome shines, even in the diffuse light, and the engine turns over with a satisfying, confident rumble. Life is good. The anxieties of the Cold War are there, of course. A low -level static in the back of everyone's mind. The newsreels in the cinema are full of talk about hydrogen bombs and distant conflicts in a place called Indochina, but here, on your quiet street, those fears fade a world away. Here, the concerns are about the Seattle Rangers' chances this season, or whether that new, fangled television set the neighbors just bought is worth the money. Driving through the city, you see the evidence of prosperity everywhere. Construction is booming. The Alaskan Way Viaduct, a concrete ribbon of a highway, now hugs the waterfront, a testament to modern engineering designed to solve the city's growing traffic problem. All around you are the fins and curves of new automobiles, each one a rolling sculpture of post-war optimism. This is a Boeing town, and the aerospace giant is thriving, building the massive B-52 Stratofortress bombers for the Air Force. In fact, just down in Renton, they're secretly working on a prototype, the Dash 80, that will soon become the legendary 707 jetliner and change air travel forever. That's the feeling of the era the future is being built. Right here, right now. You pull up to a stoplight and glance around. Life is a collection of these simple, pleasant moments. Maybe later in the summer, you'll take a date to see the Aqua Follies out at Green Lake. It's a wonderfully bizarre spectacle of synchronized swimming, comedy, and high-diving acts performed on a floating stage. It's a bit silly, a bit kitschy, but it's a local tradition, and it's pure, uncomplicated fun. It's things like this that stitch the city together. Historians still argue about this period. This seemingly placid decade. Was the quiet conformity of the 1952 a sign of genuine contentment? A society happy with its newfound suburban comforts? Or was it a lid, pressed down tight on a simmering pot of anxieties about nuclear annihilation, social change, and a world that was growing more complex by the day? It's a debate that's difficult to settle, because both things can be true at once. You can be genuinely happy about your new refrigerator while also being terrified of the bomb. But today, none of that is on your mind. Your focus is on the simple, the tangible. The light turns green. You press the accelerator, and the city glides by through the lodge, curved glass of your windshield. You look through it, not at it. It's just a window to the world. A clear barrier between you and the gentle Seattle mist. You see the road, the other cars, the pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalk. You don't see the glass itself. You don't notice the microscopic nicks and pits, the tiny imperfections that have been accumulating since the day you drove the car off the lot. They are the result of everyday life, tiny particles of sand, gravel, and road debris kicked up by the tires of the car in front of you. They are completely normal. They are completely invisible. For now. As the day ends and you drop to home, the streetlights begin to cast a warm, yellow glow on the wet streets. You park your car, give the hood an affectionate pat, and head inside. The day was ordinary. It was predictable. And that's what makes it so perfect. You feel a sense of peace, a quiet assurance that tomorrow will be much the same. You have no idea that the world is about to get very, very weird. You don't know that soon. You, your neighbors, and the entire city will be staring at the same car with a sense of mounting dread, convinced you are all under attack by a phantom menace that leaves its calling card on your windshield. But tonight, you sleep soundly. The next few days pass in a comfortable, predictable rhythm. The Seattle mist gives way to moments of brilliant, clear sky sunshine that make the snow on the Olympic mountains to the west seem close enough to touch. You go to work. You come home. You listen to the radio. It's during one of these moments. Maybe you're sitting at the breakfast table with a cup of coffee, the newspaper folded neatly beside your plate, that you first hear it. The radio announcer, in his smooth, reassuring baritone, is running through the local news. He talks about a city council's owning dispute, gives the weather forecast more of the same, and then his tone shifts almost imperceptibly, taking on a note of mild amusement. And in what's shaping up to be a peculiar story, he says, "We're getting more reports out of Bellingham, up in Whatcom County. Bellingham. It's about 90 miles north, practically another country as far as daily life is concerned. You've maybe driven through it on your way to the Canadian border. Residents there," the announcer continues, "have been contacting local police about mysterious, tiny pits appearing on their car windshield. Officials are, for the moment, baffled. One theory being floated involves sand flea eggs. You might let out a small chuckle into your coffee cup. Sand flea eggs. It sounds like something out of a science-fiction B-movie, the kind you'd see at the Dr. Inn. Speaking of which, that's one of the quintessential experiences of your era, the Dr. Inn Theatre. A palace of popular culture where you can enjoy a double feature from the privacy and comfort of your own car. Some of the newer ones have truly bizarre gimmicks to attract families. One in the Midwest apparently installed a small petting zoo and a merry go round right below the screen. It's a strange, wonderful, and uniquely American invention, and it all revolves around the car. The car is your castle, your private bubble, the idea of something mysterious attacking it, even something as silly as sand fleas, is vaguely unsettling, but mostly just funny. You don't think about it again for the rest of the day. I'm with you. It's a quirky news item from a town far away, a curiosity. That evening, you pick up the Seattle Post-Intelligence. You scan the front page concerns about the Cold War, a local political story, an advertisement for a new Kenmore washing machine. You flip through the pages, past the sports section and the comics. And there, tucked away in the back, in the metro section, you see a small headline: Windshield Pitting Puzzle Baffles Northern Town. The article isn't much longer than a few paragraphs. It repeats what you heard on the radio, adding a few more details. It says the report started about a week ago. At first, it was just a handful of calls. Now, the Bellingham Police Department is fielding dozens of them a day. The article quotes a police sergeant who sounds thoroughly exasperated. "We've looked at these cars," he says, "and we don't know what to tell people. The marks are real, but they're tiny. We can't see anything that's causing them. The article mentions the sand-free theory again, but also brings up another possibility: fallout from nearby industrial plants. It's all very vague. You fold the paper and toss it on the coffee table. It's a weird little story, but it's still their story, a Bellingham problem. This is how information moved in 1954. There was no 24-hour news cycle, no internet, no instant update spinning on a device in your pocket. News traveled at the speed of print and radio waves. A story could simmer in a specific locality for days or weeks before it ever broke through into the wider public consciousness. Historians who study media often debate the nature of this system. Was this slower pace a good thing, acting as a natural filter that prevented mass panic and allowed for more considered reflection? Or did it create information vacuums, where rumors and anxieties could fester in isolated communities, growing stronger in the dark before finally exploding into the light? The case of the Seattle Windshields would soon provide a powerful argument for the latter. Over the next day or so, the reports begin to creep closer. A radio broadcast mentions that similar calls are now coming from Anacortes and Mount Vernon, towns situated between Bellingham and Seattle. It's like watching ripples spread in a pond, a slow, methodical expansion. The tone of the reporting is still light, but it's less amused and more puzzled. The mystery is deepening. The sand-free idea is starting to sound less funny and more like a genuine, if bizarre, attempt to explain the unexplainable. You still haven't looked at your own car. The thought simply hasn't crossed your mind. The power of suggestion is a funny thing. It often needs a critical mass to take hold. Right now, this phenomenon is just words on a page, a voice on the radio. It exists in the abstract. It hasn't yet connected to the physical world you inhabit, to the heavy, solid reality of your own Chevrolet parked out on the street. You might hear your neighbors mention it over the fence. A brace. Did you hear that crazy story about the cars up north? They're just as dismissive as you are. It's a collective shrug, a moment of shared, mild bemusement. But the seed of an idea has been planted. You don't know it yet, but it's there, dormant in your mind. The idea that glass, something you perceive as perfectly solid and transparent, might be vulnerable to some invisible, unknown force. The suggestion that your personal, private space you'll carry is not as secure as you thought. Right now, it's a joke. It's a far minus of curiosity, but the ripples are getting closer, and soon, you won't be able to ignore them anymore. You'll be compelled to go outside and look for yourself. It's a Saturday morning. You have no work, no pressing errands. The day stretches out before you, full of possibilities. Maybe you'll mow the lawn, or perhaps go down to the new Northgate Mall, which proudly bills itself as the first suburban minus-style shopping center in the country. It's a marvel, a whole new way of living where everything you could possibly need is in one convenient, car-minus-friendly location. But before you do any of that, the thought finally strikes you. It doesn't arrive like a thunderclap, but more like a gentle, nagging whisper. That windshield thing. You're standing by the kitchen window, looking out at your driveway. The Chevrolet is sitting there, gleaming. The story from up north has been on your mind more than you'd care to admit. You've heard more about it on the radio, and the newspaper ran a slightly larger article this morning. The area of reported incidents now officially includes Everett, which is only about 30 miles away. The tone of the news is shifting. The word mystery is being used more frequently. So you give in. Just for the heck of it, you say to yourself, a little defensively, you grab your keys, not to drive anywhere, but just to have them in your hand. You walk outside. The air is cool. You circle the car once, admiring it, almost as if to reassure yourself that everything is normal. Then you stop at the front, facing the wide, curved expanse of safety glass. You lean in. At first, you see nothing, just the reflection of the clouds, the trees on your street, your own face staring back at you. Your expression a mixture of curiosity and slight embarrassment. You feel a little foolish. What were you expecting to find? alien larvae, atomic scorch marks. You're about to straighten up and laugh it off. But then you remember the detail from the reports: the pits are tiny. So you lean in closer, much closer. You bring your face so near to the glass that your breath fogs a small patch of it. You angle your head, trying to catch the light just right. And then you see what? It's so small you can barely register it. It's not a crack. It's not a chip. It's a pit, a minuscule, almost imperceptible indentation in the surface of the glass. It looks like someone took the finest grain of sand and threw it with impossible force, leaving a microscopic crater. Your heart does a little flutter. You scan the area around it, your eyes now fiercely focused. And there's another. And another. They're scattered randomly across the windshield. Some are so small they could be specks of dust. But when you try to wipe them away with your finger, they remain. They are part of the glass. A strange feeling washes over you. A mix of validation and dread. So it's real. It's not just some weird story from another town. It's here. It's on your car. You start to feel a prickle of unease. How did they get there? They weren't there yesterday, were they? You try to remember. You drove home last night in the dark. You washed the car last weekend. Surely you would have noticed. The very act of looking for them has now made them glaringly obvious. Before today, they were invisible. Now, they're all you can see. You call over to your neighbor, who's out weeding his garden. Hey, Frank, come take a look at this. Frank ambles over, wiping dirt from his hands onto his trousers. You point to the glass. You see that? The pitting thing they're talking about on the news. It's on my car. Frank squints. He leans in, just as you did. Well, don't be, he says, straightening up. I see him. Tiny little things. He seems more intrigued than alarmed. Wonder what in the world is causing it. Let's check yours, Martha, he calls to his wife. Soon, the three of you are huddled around Frank's Ford sedan. And sure enough, after a few moments of intense scrutiny, you find them there too. There on his windshield, just as they are on yours. The discovery is followed by a moment of loaded silence. The shared experience doesn't bring comfort. It brings a shared sense of vulnerability. It's not just you. It's happening to everyone. This moment of personal discovery is being replicated in driveways and on curbside desks all across the Seattle area. People are being primed by the media reports, and this suggestion is focusing their attention on something they've never had a reason to notice before. This is a classic element of what psychologists call a collective delusion. It doesn't necessarily mean the physical evidence is imaginary. The pits on your windshield are, in a technical sense, real. They are objective, physical imperfections in the glass. The delusion is not in their existence, but in their origin and timing, the belief that they are new, that they are appearing suddenly, and that they are the result of a single, mysterious cause. One of the more peculiar historical theories about glass itself is that it's a small-minus moving liquid. You've probably heard this one, that the reason stained glass in old European cathedrals is thicker at the bottom is because the glass has flowed downwards over centuries. It's a wonderfully romantic and intriguing idea. Unfortunately, modern material science has thoroughly debunked it. Glass is an amorphous solid. It doesn't flow at room temperature, even over thousands of years. The variance in thickness is due to the less minus than minus perfect glass manufacturing processes of the medieval period. This belief, however, is a great example of how a compelling narrative can sometimes be more powerful than mundane fact. Standing there in your driveway, staring at the baffling specs on your car, you are at a similar crossroads. The mundane explanation that this is just normal wear and tear you've never noticed is unsatisfying. It lacks drama. It lacks a villain. The alternative, that some strange, new forces at work, is far more compelling. It's also far more frightening. You spend the rest of the day in a low-minus grade state of anxiety. Every time you glance out the window at your car, you feel a jolt of unease. The car no longer looks like a symbol of freedom and prosperity. It looks like a victim. It looks like evidence of a crime. And you have no idea who or what the culprit is. The ripples have reached your shore, and the mystery is no longer out there. It's right here, in your own front yard. The weekend acts like an incubator. With more free time, more people are drawn to their cars. A new weekend ritual of anxious inspection. The conversations over the backyard fence are no longer about baseball or gardening. They are hushed, worried exchanges about the pits. The story has found fertile ground in the community. Pindell. It begins to grow with astonishing speed. By Monday morning, the trickle of reports has become a flood. The spark has found its kindling. You feel it as soon as you turn on the radio. The tone has changed completely. The amusement is gone. The puzzlement has been replaced by genuine concern. The local stations are leading with the story now. The mysterious windshield pitting epidemic continues to spread throughout the Puget Sound region. The announcer says, his voice grave. Seattle police officials report they were inundated with calls over the weekend, with hundreds of residents now reporting damage to their vehicles. He uses the word damage for the first time. It's a small change in vocabulary, but a powerful one. It is a curiosity. Damage is an attack. You drive to work, and the world looks different. Your awareness is heightened to a painful degree. You're hyper-minus aware of your windshield. Of the tiny imperfections you now can see. But more than that, you're aware of everyone else. At stoplights, you see other drivers, their faces etched with the same worried curiosity, peering intently at their own glass. You see people parked on the side of the road, running their fingers over their windshields, pointing things out to their passengers. It feels like a silent, city-wide communion of anxiety. The newspapers are all over it. The Seattle Times has a front-page headline MYST-RYPLAGUEPITSCARS. The article is filled with quotes from distressed citizens. A woman is quoted saying she watched a pit from right before my eyes. A man claims his entire windshield was peppered overnight. The stories are becoming more dramatic, more vivid. The phenomenon is taking on a life of its own, fed by fear and speculation. This rapid escalation is something sociologists call an informational cascade. It happens when individuals, seeing the actions and beliefs of others, decide to conform, even if their own private information might suggest something different. You see your neighbor panicking. You hear the serious tone on the radio. You read the dramatic newspaper headlines. All these signals tell you that the proper reaction is alarm, to remain calm. To suggest this might all be a misunderstanding would be to go against the overwhelming social current. So you worry. You worry because everyone else is worrying. To make matters worse, no one has a good explanation, without a clear, rational answer from authorities. The public imagination begins to run wild, filling the vacuum with its own theories. And this is where the story starts to get truly strange. The early, tentative ideas industrial fallout, maybe some kind of atmospheric dust, are quickly being discarded in favor of more exotic explanations. One of the fascinating things about your 1952's world is the blend of technological marvel and lingering folk belief. For instance, this is a time when the water witching or dowsing is still a surprisingly common practice in some rural communities. People will hire a man with a forked stick to find the best place to dig a well, believing implicitly in his ability to sense underground water, even in a modern city like Seattle. This undercurrent of belief in unseen forces and folk wisdom still exists. It's a willingness to accept that the world might operate on rules that science hasn't quite figured out yet. It's in this environment that the first truly bizarre theory begins to take root. The idea from Bellingham, the one you initially laughed at the sand fleas, comes roaring back. But it's mutated. It's no longer just some fleas. The story now is that the government, specifically the nearby naval air station Whidbey Island, has been conducting secret experiments. Perhaps they were testing a new kind of pest control, or maybe, some whisper, a new form of biological weapon. These phantom fleas, the theory goes, were released by accident and are now swarming through the region. They're tiny bodies containing some kind of corrosive acid that etches glass upon impact. It sounds absurd. If you think about it for more than a few seconds, it falls apart. Why would flea eggs pick glass? Why only car windshields? But in a climate of fear, absurdity is not a barrier. In fact, it can be an advantage. A strange, complex theory can feel more satisfying than a simple one, because it matches the strangeness of the experience. Historians who study mass panics often point out that the most successful rumors have a few key ingredients. They offer a specific, identifiable villain, the Navy, a plausible minus sounding if scientifically impossible mechanism, acid minus secreting fleas, and they tap into pre-minus existing anxieties, the fear of secret government experiments, Cold War paranoia. This theory had it all. As you go about your day, you hear it being discussed. In the office, in the line at the grocery store. People are talking about the bugs. They speak with a kind of grim certainty. The lack of evidence doesn't matter. The lack of official confirmation doesn't matter. The story just feels right. It makes a terrifying, random event feel a little less random. It gives the faceless threat an aim. You get home that evening and turn on your new television set. A local news anchor is standing in front of a blurred map of the Puget Sound area, pointing to the expanding zones of reported pitting. He interviews a local expert of dubious credentials who confidently explains the flea theory as if it were established fact. You sit there, watching the flickering black minus and minus white image, and the fear in the city feels palpable. A tangible thing that's seeping in through the airwaves, through the newsprint, and now, through the screen in your living room. The small, private worry you felt in your driveway on Saturday has become a public spectacle. A full minus blown media event, and it's only Monday. The days that follow are a blur of escalating strangeness. The city is now fully in the grip of the windshield pitting phenomenon. It has a name, a momentum, and a mythology. What began as a local curiosity has morphed into the single minus-minded obsession of an entire populace. The term pitting is on everyone's lips. It's the first thing you talk about with your colleagues in the morning, and the last thing you hear on the late minus night news before you go to bed. You notice a change in how people are behaving. The simple act of driving has become fraught with tension. When a truck rumbles past you, you instinctively flinch, imagining a fresh volley of invisible agents of destruction striking your windshield. You find yourself cleaning your car's glass with an almost obsessive regularity, not for cleanliness, but for surveillance. Each time you wipe it down, you conduct a fresh, anxious inspection, cataloging any new pits you find, your stomach tightening with each discovery. You are a detective and a victim in a crime with no perpetrator. The sand flea theory, as bizarre as it is, has taken firm hold. It's a testament to the power of a narrative. Any narrative, in the face of uncertainty. People need an explanation. And the more the authorities admit they don't have one, the more the public clings to the theories they create for themselves. The story evolves with each telling. Some versions now claim the fleas are not from a naval experiment, but are actually radioactive, a byproduct of the atomic testing being conducted out at the Hanford site in eastern Washington. This taps into the deepest, most potent fear of the 1952's the invisible threat of radiation. You've seen the civil defense films at the cinema. The ones with the cheerful cartoon turtle named Bert who teaches you to duck and cover. You've participated in air-raid drills. The atomic age has created a new kind of anxiety, a fear of something you can't see, taste, or smell, but which can silently poison you and the world around you. The idea that this poison could now be manifesting as tiny marks on your car is both terrifying and, in a strange way, validating. It makes the abstract fear of the bomb feel concrete. One of the more peculiar, and frankly a little sad, pieces of pop culture from this era are the atomic minus-themed toys for children. You could buy a Gilbert U-238 atomic energy lab for your son or nephew. This wasn't a joke. It was a real, commercially available toy science kit that came with, among other things, actual samples of uranium ore. The goal was to make nuclear science feel less scary and more like an exciting frontier of discovery. In retrospect, the idea of giving radioactive materials to children seems astonishingly reckless. A perfect symbol of the era's often minus conflicting relationship with atomic power, a mix of casual optimism and deep minus-seated terror. It's this terror that is now fueling the pitting panic. The official response, or lack thereof, only makes things worse. The Seattle Police Department, overwhelmed with calls, issues a statement. They essentially throw their hands up. They confirm that the reports are widespread, but state they have no evidence of any malicious act. They have found no projectiles, no chemical residues, no nothing. This admission of helplessness is meant to be calming, but it has the opposite effect. If the police don't know what it is, it must be something truly strange and powerful. It's around this time that the phenomenon gets its official, media-sanctioned name. A journalist, searching for a dramatic phrase, calls it the Seattle Windshield Pitting Epidemic. The word epidemic is a masterstroke of sensationalism. It recasts the event as a disease, a contagion spreading uncontrollably through the city. The cars are not just being damaged, they are sick, and the implication is that the sickness might not be limited to them. Historians are still debating the precise moment when the story tipped from a local news item into a full-blown mass hysteria. Was it a specific newspaper headline, a particular radio report? Or was it the moment the official authorities, like the police, effectively bowed out, leaving the field open for rumor and speculation to become the dominant source of information? It's likely a combination of all three. Once a panic reaches a certain velocity, it generates its own gravity, pulling more and more people into its orbit until it seems like the only reality. You feel this gravity yourself. Even if a part of you remains skeptical, it's hard to resist the pull of the collective mood. When everyone around you is convinced the sky is falling, you can't help but keep looking up. The search for a cause becomes a civic pastime. People begin to connect the pitting to all sorts of unrelated phenomena. Did a flight of military jets just fly over? People run outside to check their windshields. Did that factory across town just release a plume of smoke? It must be the cause. The city has developed a kind of collective confirmation bias. Everyone is looking for evidence that confirms the narrative of an attack, and they are finding it everywhere. The normal, everyday occurrences of city life are now seen through a lens of suspicion. Every small, insignificant detail is potentially a clue. The world has been re-enchanted in the most terrifying way, filled with invisible forces and secret plots. And at the center of it all is your car, parked in your driveway, a silent monument to an anxiety that has taken on a life of its own. The Tranquil theory, for all its narrative power, starts to feel a bit silly. It was a good starting point, a suitably weird explanation for a weird phenomenon, but as the panic deepens, the public's need for a more serious minus-sounding culprit grows. The city is in the mood for a villain, and a microscopic, acid-spitting flea just doesn't have the gravitas. The conversation on the street, in the office break rooms, and on the radio call-in shows, begins to pivot. The focus shifts from the biological to the geological, and the Tranquil theory is about to be replaced by something even more insidious. You hear the news theory first from a co-worker. He leans over your desk, his voice low and conspiratorial. "It's not fleas," he says, with the confidence of a man who has uncovered a deep truth. "It's the H-bomb." He is talking about the hydrogen bomb test that the United States had conducted just a month and a half earlier, on March 1st, 1954, at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. It was codenamed Castle Bravo. This was just any test. It was a monster. The explosion was more than 2.5 times more powerful than scientists had predicted. A colossal 15-megaton blaster was 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The test was, in many ways, a catastrophic miscalculation. It created a plume of radioactive fallout that spread over an enormous area, contaminating several inhabited islands under Japanese fishing boat. The Daigo-fuku Awayu Meru Lucky Dragon No. 5, which was sailing outside the designated danger zone. The story of the Lucky Dragon and its irradiated crew had been major international news. It was the first time the world had to confront the horrifying reality of nuclear fallout on a human scale. Think about it. Your co-worker continues, tapping his finger on your desk for emphasis. They set that thing off in the Pacific. The fallout gets swept up into the jet stream. It blows right across to us. It's been raining down on us for weeks. Silent and invisible. And now, it's eating our cars. The theory is terrifyingly elegant. It connects a real, known event, the Castle Bravo test, with the mystery plaguing the city. It explains the invisible nature of the attacker and the microscopic scale of the damage. It feels scientific, plausible, and it validates the deepest fears of the atomic age. The idea spreads through the city like a flash fire. The sand flea is forgotten overnight. The new villain is Fallout. This is a prime example of how collective anxieties work. The fear isn't just about the windshields anymore. It never really was. The windshields are just a screen onto which the city is projecting its larger, more profound anxieties. The fear of nuclear war, of invisible poison, of a government that is conducting unimaginably powerful experiments without fully understanding the consequences. These are the real demons haunting Seattle. The pitting is just the first physical manifestation of those demons. What's particularly fascinating is how specific details from the news were woven into the new theory. People weren't just saying fallout. They were specifically mentioning the Castle Bravo test. They were talking about the jet stream. This gave the rumor of an air of expertise and credibility. It sounded like people had figured it out, piecing together clues that the foolish authorities had missed. One of the lesser minus known, but utterly bonkers, aspects of the Cold War's public face was the Miss Atomic Bomb beauty pageant, held in Las Vegas in the 1950s. At a time when atomic tests were a regular tourist attraction in the Nevada desert, the pageant contestants would pose in mushroom-cloud-themed bathing suits. It's a jarring, surreal piece of history that perfectly captures the era's cognitive dissonance, the attempt to domesticate and even sexualize the most destructive force ever created by humankind. The winner of the 1953 pageant famously posed with a mushroom cloud-shaped cotton wig. It's a stark reminder of how societies try to normalize the unthinkable. But here in Seattle, the unthinkable is no longer a distant spectacle. It feels like it has arrived. The fallout theory raises the stakes enormously. If radioactive particles are concentrated enough to pit glass, what are they doing to our lungs, to the milk, to our children? The panic, which had been focused on property damage, now takes on a new, deeply personal and existential dimension. The debate among historians continues: was this leap to the H-bomb theory a spontaneous, grassroots phenomenon, or was it nudged along by specific media reports or commentators who first made the connection? It's a classic chicken and egg problem of rumor transmission. It's almost impossible to trace a rumor back to its single point of origin. But once it was out there, it was unstoppable. You go home that night, the H-bomb theory ringing in your ears. You look at your family. You think about the rain that fell last week, the water you drank, the air you're breathing. The tiny, insignificant pits on your windshield no longer look like a nuisance. They look like an omen. They are a warning, written in a microscopic language of destruction, telling you that the vast, terrifying geopolitics of the Cold War are no longer a black and white newsreel story. The war has come home, and its first quiet casualties are the windows through which you see the world. The narrative has shifted from the bizarre to the truly terrifying, and the city's mood could or less. The H-bomb theory is not just a rumor anymore. For many, it's an accepted fact. The pits on the windshield are no longer just damage. They are symptoms of a nuclear sickness. This is when you begin to notice a change in your own perception. A strange trick your mind starts to play on you. You're driving home from work, your knuckles white on the steering wheel, your eyes scanning the glass in front of you. You are hyper-vigilant. Suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, you think you see it. A flicker, a tiny, instantaneous sparkle on the windshield surface. Did a pit just form? You gasp, your heart lurching. You try to pinpoint the location, but you can't find it. Was it just a reflection? A trick of the light? Or did you just witness the invisible radioactive fallout claim another microscopic piece of your car? This experience of witnessing a pit form spontaneously becomes a common theme in the stories people tell. Friends, neighbors, and callers on the radio all begin to report seeing the pits appear in real time. It's a powerful, terrifying claim, and it adds a new layer of immediacy to the crisis. The attack isn't just happening at night, or when you're not looking. It's happening now, all around you. What's going on here is a psychological phenomenon that researchers would later study in detail. It's a combination of heightened focus and cognitive bias when you stare intently at any complex surface, especially one with transparent and reflective qualities like a windshield. Your brain and eyes have to work hard. You'll naturally see flickers of light, tiny floaters in your own eyes, and small distortions. Normally, your brain filters these out as irrelevant noise. But now, your brain has been told what to look for. It has a specific, fear-laden template, the spontaneous formation of a pit. So when it registers one of these random, meaningless flickers, it interprets it through that template. It sees what it expects to see. The entire city is now engaged in this collective act of heightened perception. Everyone has become a watchman, staring at their glass, waiting for the enemy to strike. And because they are waiting, they see it. This feedback loop is what makes mass hysteria so potent. The belief creates the evidence, and the evidence reinforces the belief. Your neighborhood begins to change. The quiet, manicured streets now have an air of a community under siege. You see Frank, your neighbor, meticulously washing his car, not with a cheerful weekend enthusiasm, but with a grim, surgical focus. HES not just washing it, HES decontaminating it. Another neighbor down the street has taken a more direct approach. You see him in his driveway with a roll of thick plastic sheeting untaped, carefully covering his entire windshield, as if tucking it into bed. The gesture is absurd, yet completely understandable. It's a desperate attempt to do something, to exert some small measure of control over a situation that feels utterly out of control. There's a strange historical parallel here. In the late 19th century, there was a widespread belief in sewer gas theory, or the miasma theory of disease, before germ theory was fully accepted. Many doctors and public health officials believed that diseases like cholera, the plague, were caused by miasma, a form of bad air that emanated from rotting organic matter in sewers. This led to all sorts of strange architectural and public works projects designed to bend this bad air away from homes. People would seal their windows at night, not against burglars, but against the invisible poison they believed was creeping in from the streets. They were fighting a phantom menace based on the best, most logical minus-sounding theory they had at the time. Your neighbor, with his plastic minus wrapped Ford, is doing the exact same thing. The academic debate here is a fascinating one. Some sociologists argue that these panics are purely a product of suggestion and social contagion, that it's all in the mind. Others argue that there's often a real, underlying environmental trigger, even if it's misidentified. For instance, some have retroactively theorized that maybe a specific industrial pollutant was released at the time, causing some minor effect that the public then blew out of proportion. The consensus, however, leans heavily towards the former. The problem wasn't in the air. It was in the conversation. The fear is now a tangible part of your daily routine. You hesitate before letting your kids play outside for too long. You find yourself eyeing the sky with suspicion. Is it going to rain? What will that rain bring with it? The most mundane aspects of life are now tinged with dread. This is the point in the epidemic where the lines between individual belief and shared reality completely dissolve. You are no longer just a person with a worry. You are a cell in a larger, anxious organism. The city of Seattle has developed a collective delusion. Its eyes are now trained on the glass of its automobiles, and through that glass, it sees a reflection of its deepest Cold War fears. The whole city has become a laboratory for the study of panic, and you are one of the unwitting test subjects. You are watching your own mind, and the minds of everyone around you, play tricks on you, and the most frightening part is, it all feels completely, utterly real. The H-bomb fallout theory, with its terrifying implications, settles over the city like the persistent grey clouds. But it's not the only idea gaining traction. In a panic, the human mind doesn't settle on one explanation. It auditions several, often holding contradictory beliefs at the same time, while the nuclear anxiety simmers. A more localized and, in some ways, more traditional suspect emerges industry. Seattle in 1954 is a powerhouse of production. The skyline is punctuated by smokestacks, and the air in certain neighborhoods carries the distinct smells of manufacturing. The Duwamish River, the city's industrial artery, isn't the cleaned minor sub-waterway of the future. It's a hard-working, polluted river. And, of course, there's the ever-present giant Boeing. The company's massive clouds in redundancy at a law churning out aircraft for the military and the burgeoning commercial market. They are a source of immense civic pride and prosperity. But now, in this climate of fear, they become a source of suspicion. You start to hear a new line of reasoning from the people around you. Maybe this isn't fallout from some distant atoll in the Pacific. Maybe the culprit is right here, in our own backyard. It's that new aluminum smelting process they're using, someone might say with authority at the local diner. Or it's the paint they're spraying on those new jet bombers. The particles are getting into the air and settling on our cars. This theory has a different flavor from the H-bomb narrative. The fallout theory was apocalyptic, global, and existential. The industrial pollution theory is more personal. It's about a local betrayal. The very engines of the city's prosperity could be the ones poisoning it. This creates a new kind of social tension. It pits neighbor against neighbor, citizen against corporation. A man whose livelihood depends on his job at a manufacturing plant might find himself arguing with his neighbor, who is convinced that same plant is destroying his car and potentially his health. The main target of suspicion, apart from Boeing, is the Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island. It's a huge military installation, and its operations are, by their nature, somewhat mysterious to the public. This makes it a perfect blank canvas for fearful speculation. The old Some Flea theory had its roots here, and now it gets a technological update. People start talking about sonar. They're testing some new kind of high-frequency sonar out in the Puget Sound. The rumor goes, the sonic vibrations are traveling through the water, or maybe even the air, and they're creating a harmonic resonance that's shattering the crystalline structure of the glass. This is, of course, pure scientific gibberish. It sounds impressive, mixing real terms like sonar and harmonic resonance into a nonsensical soup, but it's exactly the kind of explanation that thrives in these situations. It's what some researchers call technobabble. It uses the language of science to give credibility to a fundamentally magical idea. The belief that sound can shatter glass is ancient. Think of the opera singer and the champagne flute, so the theory feels intuitively plausible, even if the physics of it are completely fantastical. This focus on industrial and military causes highlights a deep-seated ambiguity in the post-war American psyche. On the one hand, there's immense pride in the nation's industrial and technological might. This is the Can-2 generation that built the machines that won the war. On the other hand, there's a growing unease about the unintended consequences of this progress. The smog in cities like Los Angeles is becoming a serious problem. The first stirrings of the environmental movement are still a decade away, but the seeds are there. People are beginning to wonder if there's a hidden cost to all this wonderful new technology. A quirky, and largely forgotten, piece of this history is the backyard scrap drive. During World War II, patriotism and industrial need fused in a very direct way. The government urged citizens to collect scrap metal, old pots, pans, license plates, even metal toys to be melted down and repurposed for the war effort. It created a powerful, positive link between the home front and the factory. People felt like their old frying pan was personally contributing to building a new tank or airplane. Now, less than a decade later, that relationship is being inverted. The factory is no longer a partner in a noble cause. It's a potential threat. Its emissions the suspected cause of a mysterious plague. The debate among historians on this point is subtle but important. Did the windshield pitting epidemic represent an early form of environmental anxiety, a precursor to the movements of the 60 seconds and 70 seconds? Or was it simply a convenient way to find a local scapegoat for a problem that felt too large and abstract when blamed on distant H-bombs? There's no definitive answer. It was likely a muddle of both. People were genuinely worried about what was in the air they were breathing, and blaming a local factory felt more manageable than confronting the specter of global nuclear annihilation. So now you have at least three major theories circulating, all at once. The pits are caused by radioactive H-bomb fallout, by secret Navy sonar tests, or by industrial pollution from local factories. You might find yourself believing parts of all of them. Maybe the fallout weakened the glass, and the industrial emissions are now finishing the job. The human mind is remarkably good at weaving disparate threads of anxiety into a single, terrifying tapestry. The search for a single, rational explanation has been abandoned. Now, it feels like the city is being assaulted from all sides, from the sky, from the sea, and from within. The switch has been flipped. A few days ago, you had to actively search for the pits, leaning in close, catching the light at just the right angle. Now, you can't stop seeing them. They are everywhere. This isn't just a psychological shift anymore. It's a profound change in your visual perception of the world. The city has, in effect, put on a new pair of glasses, a prescription for paranoia. You're walking down the street, and your eyes are no longer drawn to faces, to architecture, to the general flow of life. Your gaze is pulled, as if by a magnet, to glass. You find yourself automatically scanning the windshield of every car you pass, and on every single one, you see them. The pristine, untouched windshield no longer exists in your version of Seattle. Every car is a victim. Every piece of glass is popped, scarred, undamaged. But it doesn't stop with cars. The contagion of perception begins to spread. You're sitting in a bus, staring out the window at the passing city. Your eyes unfocus for a moment from the scenery outside and settle on the glass itself. And there they are. What are they? Tiny specks, little imperfections. Are they pits? Or just dirt? You rub a spot with your sleeve. It doesn't come off. A jolt of anxiety hits you. It's not just cars anymore. The phantom menace is attacking everything. Soon, reports start trickling into the police and newspapers about pitting on house windows. A frantic homeowner calls the radio station to say his brand minus new picture window, installed just last week, is now covered in the mysterious marks. The panic finds a new frontier. People are now nervously inspecting the windows of their own homes, the very barriers that are supposed to keep the dangers of the world outside. The sanctity of the home feels violated. This is a critical stage in the anatomy of a mass panic. The phenomenon is generalizing. The initial, specific target car windshields was the beachhead. Now the invasion is spreading inland. This is where the line between a shared observation, even a mistaken one, and a full-minus blown delusion becomes truly blurry. The damage on a car windshield could, at least in theory, be explained away by road wear, but a stationary window on a house, that requires a different kind of explanation. It requires a force that is truly airborne. something that is settling out of the sky onto every exposed surface. This new development powerfully reinforces the H-bomb and industrial fallout theories. The human brain is an incredible pattern-recognition machine. It's one of our greatest evolutionary advantages. It allows us to see the faint outline of a predator in the tall grass, or recognize the subtle signs of a coming storm. But this strength is also a weakness. The brain is so good at finding patterns that it will sometimes create them where none exist. It abhors randomness. This is the principle behind seeing faces in clouds or hearing whispers in the static of an untuned radio. In 1954 Seattle, the entire city's collective brain is working overtime, connecting unrelated data points like our windshield, a house window, a storefront, and weaving them into a single, terrifying pattern of attack. This is also a time of great innovation in materials, which adds a layer of genuine confusion. For example, a little known fact is that the early versions of Pyrex, the famous heat-resistant glass used in kitchenware and science labs, were made of borosilicate glass. This material was revolutionary but also had different physical properties than the standard soda-lime glass used in windows. Did different types of glass react differently to whatever was happening? People began to speculate. It's not on my drinking glasses, someone might observe, but it's all over the bathroom window. These small, everyday observations become crucial data points in the great civic investigation, even though they are ultimately meaningless. Historians who study these events are often asked if people were faking it. Were they knowingly lying when they reported seeing pits on their house windows? The answer, for the most part, is no. They genuinely believed what they were seeing. The power of suggestion, especially when backed by overwhelming social consensus and deep-seated fear, can physically alter how we perceive sensory information. They weren't lying. Their brains were lying to them. It's a subtle but crucial distinction. Now the world outside your window looks menacing. The very air seems suspect. The familiar sight of a smokestack on the horizon or a high-flying airplane is no longer a symbol of progress. It's a potential source of the attack. You find yourself in a state of constant, low-grade vigilance. Every surface is a potential site of damage, a clue to the ongoing mystery. The city is now massive, open-air Rorschach test, where a visitor might see a normal, bustling American city. You and your fellow citizens see a battlefield. You see evidence of an invisible war being waged on a microscopic scale. The psychological toll is immense. The world feels less safe, less solid, less predictable. The trust in what your own eyes are telling you begins to erode. If you can't be sure that a simple window is just a window, what can you be sure of? The pits on the glass have become a metaphor for the cracks that are appearing in the city's sense of reality itself. The industrial pollution and sonar theories were unsettling, but they were at least local. They were problems that, in theory, could be solved by a city council meeting or a corporate policy change. But as the panic intensifies and the damage seems to appear on everything, these explanations start to feel too small for the scale of the phenomenon. The city's imagination, steeped in the anxieties of the decade, inevitably turns toward the biggest, most terrifying ghost in the room, the atom. The H-bomb fallout theory, which had been simmering, now boils over and takes complete control of the narrative. You're reliving in the heart of the atomic age. This isn't just a political reality. It's a cultural one. The atom is everywhere. It's in the names of businesses, like the Atomic Laundry or the Atomic Cafe. It's in the design of furniture and architecture, with starburst clocks and boomerang-shaped coffee tables meant to evoke a futuristic, atomic aesthetic. The very shape of the atom, with its orbiting electrons, has become a symbol of modernity and power. But behind this shiny, optimistic facade is a deep, primal fear. You've seen the images from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You've been told about the horrors of radiation sickness. The government's own civil defense programs, meant to be reassuring, often have the opposite effect. They produce films and pamphlets that instruct you on how to build a fallout shelter in your backyard and how to stock it with canned goods and water. The very existence of these instructions implies that a nuclear attack is not a remote possibility, but a plausible future for which you must prepare. One of the most surreal and chilling artifacts of this era is the Kitty Coca 1, a proposed protective crib for infants in case of nuclear attack. It was a bizarre, coffin-like enclosure made of asbestos-lined fiberboard with a gas mask-like filter. Thankfully, it was never mass-produced. But its design speaks volumes about the pervasive anxiety that parents were living with the need to conceive of a way to protect their children from an invisible world sending poison. It's this deep cultural dread that the windshield pitting epidemic now latches onto. The leap of logic is terrifyingly simple. The Castle Bravo test released a massive radioactive cloud. The cloud drifted over Seattle. The radioactive particles from that cloud are now settling on the city and are powerful enough to physically etch glass. The pits are not just pits. They are tiny, radioactive burns. This theory explains everything. It explains why the damage is so widespread, appearing on cars and houses alike. It explains why the agent of destruction is invisible, and most importantly, it aligns perfectly with the number one fear in the public consciousness. It provides a grand, unified theory for a world that suddenly feels chaotic and threatening. The story of the Lucky Dragon fishing boat is retold with renewed fervor. The fishermen hadn't seen or felt the fallout, they just saw a fine white ash fall on their deck, which they called Chinohai, the ash of death. Days later, they were suffering from acute radiation sickness. This story becomes a powerful cautionary tale for the citizens of Seattle. Are the pits on the windshield the city's own ash of death? Is everyone in Seattle, like the crew of the Lucky Dragon, already poisoned and just not showing symptoms yet? The academic community has long debated the role of the media in this specific turn of the narrative. Did reporters, seeking a sensational angle, deliberately connect the pitting to the H-bomb tests? Or were they simply reflecting the fears that were already circulating in the community? It's a contentious point. Some historical accounts suggest that certain radio personalities and newspaper columnists were instrumental in popularizing the H-bomb theory, giving it a platform and a veneer of legitimacy. Others argue that the media was just chasing a story that the public was already creating on its own. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. A feedback loop where public fear and media coverage amplified each other. You can feel this amplification in your daily life. The radio news bulletins sound more urgent. The newspaper headlines are starker. A kind of fatalism begins to set in. If the city is being blanketed by fallout, what can anyone possibly do? Covering your windshield with a plastic sheet seems laughably inadequate against the power of the atom. The fear is no longer about property damage. It's about survival. You look at the food you ate, the water you drank, with a new sense of suspicion. The invisible threat is not just outside, on your car. It's potentially inside your body. The panic has turned inward. The pits on the glass have become a mirror, and in them, the city sees a reflection of its own mortality. The Cold War has ceased to be a distant chess game between superpowers. For the people of Seattle in the spring of 1954, it has become a terrifyingly intimate reality, manifesting as a mysterious plague upon the glass that separates them from a world they no longer trust. The city is a pressure cooker, and the mayor, Alan Pomeroy, can feel the heat. Up until now, the official response has been a mixture of confused silence and helpless shrugging from the police department. But that is no longer sustainable. The H-bomb theory has taken the panic to a whole new level. The phones at City Hall are ringing off the hook. The newspapers are demanding answers. The city is teetering on the edge of a full-blown breakdown in public order, and something has to be done. Mayor Pomeroy is a respectable, sober figure, an embodiment of the calm, business-like governance that Seattle prided itself on. HES not a showman or a firebrand. HES a problem-solver, and he has a very big, very weird problem on his hands. He can see that the real threat to the city isn't microscopic pits on windshields. It's the corrosive power of fear itself. He decides he has to step in, to use the authority of his office to try and turn down the temperature. He calls a press conference. The room is packed with reporters and radio journalists, all clamoring for a definitive statement. You, along with the rest of the city, are glued to your radio, waiting to hear what the man in charge has to say. When he speaks, his tone is carefully chosen. It's calm, firm, and reassuring. He wants to project an aura of control. I have been in close contact with the chief of police and other city officials. He begins, his voice steady. I want to assure the citizens of Seattle that we are taking this matter with the utmost seriousness. He acknowledges the public sphere directly. I know many of you are concerned. There are many theories circulating, some of them quite alarming. This is a critical moment. He has to debunk the dangerous rumors without sounding dismissive, without making people feel like their legitimate fears are being ignored. It's a political and psychological tightrope walk. He announces that he has spoken with experts at the University of Washington and with military officials at the nearby bases. He states, unequivocally, there is no evidence whatsoever to support the theory that this phenomenon is related to H-bomb tests or any kind of radioactive fallout. He repeats it for emphasis, none whatsoever. He then tries to offer an alternative, more mundane explanation. He suggests that the pitting is likely the result of ordinary road damage caused by particles of rock and asphalt. He explains that people are simply noticing it for the first time because of the intense media attention. In essence, he is the first official figure to publicly state the truth. He is trying to gently tell the entire city that it's all in their heads. It doesn't work. For a populace caught in the grip of a powerful delusion, a simple, rational explanation is the least satisfying answer possible. It feels like a cover minus up. It feels like he's treating you like a child. Of course he'd say that. Your neighbor might scoff, turning away from his own radio in disgust. The government would never admit they've poisoned us all. The mayor's calm reassurance is interpreted as a sign that he's part of the conspiracy. His denial is seen as proof. This is a classic feature of paranoid thinking. Any evidence that contradicts the core belief is immediately framed as part of the plot. The attempt to quell the panic backfires spectacularly and, in some ways, makes it even worse. Now the panic has a new villain, Mayor Pomeroy, in the official story he's trying to sell. A little known fact about municipal governance in this era is the rise of the city manager system. In many American cities, the elected mayor was becoming more of a ceremonial figure, while the day-to-day administration was handled by an political, professional city manager. Seattle, however, still had a strong mayor system, meaning Alan Pomeroy had significant executive power. This made his personal intervention all the more significant. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was the man in charge. And in the public's eyes, he was now the man in charge of the cover minus up. The debate still lingers among political scientists and historians. Could Pomeroy have handled it differently? Should he have waited longer? Should he have formed a citizens' committee first to create a sense of public by in? Or was the panic so far gone that any attempt at rational intervention was doomed to fail? It's a case study in the limits of leadership during a crisis of public perception. You can't fight fear with facts if the public has decided that facts themselves are no longer trustworthy. Mayor Pomeroy's statement, intended as a firebreak, instead acts as fuel. The story now has an element of conflict. The people versus the authorities. Coal-in radio shows become battlegrounds, with citizens angrily denouncing the mayor's patronizing explanation and sharing ever dramatic stories of the damage they are witnessing. They are more convinced than ever that something huge and sinister is happening, precisely because the mayor tried to tell them it wasn't. You feel this conflict yourself. A part of you wants to believe the mayor. You want to believe that the world is still a rational, predictable place. But the evidence of your own eyes, the pits you now see everywhere, and the overwhelming consensus of your peers are a powerful counter-argument. Who are you going to believe? The politician on the radio? Or your own two eyes and the shared experience of your entire community? For most of Seattle, the choice is easy. They believe their eyes. The mayor tried to calm the storm, but instead, he has become the lightning rod. While the city is consumed by existential dread and conspiracy theories, one particular segment of the local economy is quietly experiencing an unprecedented boom. Down on Automobile Row, the stretches of streets lined with dealerships and repair shops, the owners of auto glass replacement businesses are watching the unfolding panic with a mixture of bewilderment and delight. Their phones have started ringing, and they haven't stopped. You've been agonizing over your windshield for days. The pits, which once seemed like a mere curiosity, now feel like a personal affront, a constant, nagging reminder of the invisible threat. The mayor's statement did nothing to calm your nerves. If anything, it made you more anxious. So you make a decision. You can't fight the fallout. You can treason with the Navy. But you can do this one thing. You can fix your car. You decide to replace the windshield. You call the first auto glass shop in the phone book. The line is busy. You try another. Busy. On the third try, a harried minus-sounding man answers the phone. City Glass, can I help you? You explain your situation, that your windshield is covered in the new, mysterious pits. You can almost hear the man on the other end of the line roll his eyes through the receiver. You and everybody else in town. Buddy, he says, not unkindly. We can get you in, but it's gonna be a wait. We're booked solid for the next week and a half. A week and a half. To replace a windshield, this is unheard of. You hang up, stunned. The crisis is so real that it's now affecting the basic mechanics of the city's commerce. You finally get on a waiting list at a smaller shop, but the experience is jarring. The men who run these shops are in a very strange position. They are the ground minus level experts on the very thing causing the panic. They spend their entire day looking at, handling, and replacing windshields. They know what normal road damage looks like better than anyone. When the first few customers came in, pointing with genuine fear at the tiny specks on their glass, the shop owners were baffled. That's just road pitting. Ma'am, they would explain patiently. Every car gets it. It's perfectly normal. But the customers would have none of it. No, they would insist. These are new. They weren't there yesterday. It's the format. After a while, the shop owners realize that arguing is pointless. It's like trying to tell someone the sky isn't blue. The customers don't want an explanation. They want a solution. And the solution is a new, pristine, perfectly clear piece of glass. So the owners stop arguing and start writing up work orders. The supply chain for auto parts in the 1950s was not the just minus in minus time, globally interconnected system it is today. A windshield was a big, heavy, fragile piece of equipment. A typical shop might keep a handful of the most common models in stock, but for anything else, they'd have to order it from a regional distributor in Portland or even San Francisco. Suddenly, every auto glass shop in Seattle is placing massive orders for every conceivable make and model of windshield. The regional distributors are swamped. Their inventory wiped out in a matter of days. A little minus known fact about the auto industry of this period is the sheer variety of windshield designs. The post-minus war era was a time of exuberant, often impractical styling. Windshields weren't just flat panes of glass. They were complex, curved, panoramic wraparound designs that were incredibly difficult and expensive to manufacture and replace. Replacing the glass on a 1950 Cadillac Eldorado was a far more complicated job than on a simple Ford. This complexity only added to the backlog and the expense. Historians and economists who have studied the event find this commercial aspect fascinating. It's a perfect, quantifiable measure of the panic's intensity. They can track the spike in sales figures for auto glass, which serve as a direct proxy for the level of public fear. The debate is whether the shop owners were acting unethically. Were they exploiting the public's fear for profit? Most accounts suggest they weren't. They didn't raise their prices exorbitantly. They were mostly just confused. Overworked business owners trying to keep up with an inexplicable and overwhelming demand. They were participants in the madness, but they were also its accidental beneficiaries. You finally get your car to the shop. As you wait, you see other car owners. Their faces grim, all there for the same reason. It feels like a field hospital for machines, a place where the casualties of the invisible war are being treated. When you finally drive away, the world looks stunningly, almost unnaturally clear through your brand-new windshield. There are no pits, no specks, no imperfections. It feels like a victory. You feel a sense of relief and control that you haven't felt in weeks. But the feeling is fleeting. As you drop to home, a new, chilling thought enters your mind. How long will this one last? The new windshield feels fragile, vulnerable. You find yourself driving with excessive caution, leaving huge gaps between you and the car in front, pinching at every passing truck. The brand-new glass hasn't solved your anxiety. It has only given you a new, pristine surface to worry about. You've treated the symptom, but the disease of fear remains, and you've just paid a handsome sum to a bewildered mechanic for the privilege. As the waiting lists at auto glass shops grow in the H-bomb theory spiral, the pressure on the city's official institutions becomes unbearable. Mayor Pomeroy's attempt at calming reassurance has failed. Now, the public's focus, and their frustration, turns to the one institution people expect to solve crimes and restore order: the police. And the chief of police, a man named Jim Lawrence, is about to make a fateful decision. Chief Lawrence is in an impossible position. His officers are spending an enormous amount of time responding to pitting calls. They drive out to a citizen's home, look at the windshield, and see nothing, or rather, they see what they know to be normal, microscopic road wear. They file a report that says no evidence of crime, which only angers the citizen, who feels dismissed and unprotected. The department's resources are being drained by a crime that has no criminals, no weapon, and, as far as they can tell, no victims. The pressure from the public, the media, and City Hall to do something is immense. So Chief Lawrence decides on a strategy of radical transparency. He figures that if the mayor's attempt to provide a rational explanation failed, maybe a frank admission of helplessness will work. Perhaps if he just levels with the public and admits that his department is as baffled as they are, it will create a sense of shared struggle rather than conflict. He decides to give a public statement. We have exhausted all the resources at our disposal, he tells the assembled reporters, his voice heavy with frustration. We have conducted countless investigations. We have consulted with experts. And we have found absolutely nothing. We don't know what this is. He then delivers the line that will become the defining quote of the entire episode. He looks directly at the cameras and says, "This is a case of public hysteria. The police department officially gives up." It's a stunning statement. The chief law enforcement officer of a major American city is publicly, officially surrendering. He doesn't surrender to a criminal gang or a foreign enemy. He surrenders to the mystery itself. His intention is clear. HES trying to shock the city back to its senses. HES using the word hysteria deliberately, hoping the cynical, slightly embarrassing term will make people step back and question their own behavior. He is, in effect, holding up a mirror to the city and saying, "Look at what you are doing. This is not a police matter. This is a psychological one." The effect is the exact opposite of what he intended. The public does not hear this as old in your heads. They hear the problem is so powerful, so strained, and so far beyond conventional understanding that even the police, with all their power and authority, are helpless to stop it. The chief's surrender is not seen as a call for rationality, but as the ultimate validation of the panic. If the police are giving up, it must be really, really bad. The headline in the next day's paper is POLICEGIVUP. The H-bomb theories go into overdrive. Of course the police are giving up. How can a cop with a revolver fight radioactive fallout? The chief's statement is interpreted as a coded admission that the problem is military in nature and therefore outside of his jurisdiction. The conspiracy theories now have their strongest piece of evidence yet. A fascinating, and somewhat obscure, aspect of policing in the 1950s was the beginning of a shift towards professionalization. Influential figures like O.W. Wilson were advocating for law enforcement to be more scientific, data-driven, and removed from political influence. Police departments were adopting formal uniforms, paramilitary ranks, and a focus on crime statistics. The ideal was to just the facts. Ma'am detective. A cool, rational crime fighter. Chief Law says public surrender was a complete violation of this new professional ideal. He showed emotion. He admitted defeat, and he delved into public psychology. It was an act of desperation, and it broke the carefully constructed facade of unflappable police authority. The academic debate surrounding Lawrence's statement is intense. Was it a colossal blunder? A textbook example of how not to manage public fear? Or was it a brave, if misguided, attempt to tell the truth in a situation where no other official was willing to? Some sociologists argue that by giving up, Lawrence inadvertently passed the baton of authority to another group, the scientists. His surrender created a vacuum that only a higher, more trusted authority could fill. Others contend it was simply a catastrophic misreading of the public mood. A moment that pushed the city from mass anxiety into full-blown, unmanageable panic. Following the chief's announcement, the atmosphere in the city becomes even more tense. The feeling is no longer just fear, but a sense of abandonment. The institutions that are supposed to protect you, the mayor's office, the police department, have either dismissed your fears or surrendered to them. You and your neighbors are on your own. The social contract feels broken. You look at the POLICEGIVEUP headline in your morning paper, and a feeling of profound unease settles in your stomach. The thin veneer of order and control that you take for granted in daily life has been stripped away. The problem of the pitted windshields has now exposed a deeper fragility, not in the glass of your car, but in the civic structures you rely on. The police have surrendered. The mayor is seen as part of a cover-up, and the invisible enemy, whatever it is, continues its silent, relentless assault. The city feels adrift, and no one is at the helm. In the wake of the police chief's surrender, a sense of desperate self-reliance takes over the city. If the authorities can't or won't protect you, you'll have to protect yourself. The fight against the phantom menace moves from the halls of government to the driveways and garages of suburban Seattle. This is the moment when the panic manifests itself in physical, often bizarre, acts of defense. You'd already seen your neighbor, trained, meticulously covering his Ford's windshield with a plastic sheet. Now, this kind of behavior becomes commonplace. It's a new evening ritual in your neighborhood. As the sun sets, people come out of their houses armed with old blankets, canvas tarps, squares of linoleum, and even flattened cardboard boxes. They carefully drape these materials over the hoods and windshields of their cars, tucking them in around the wipers and mirrors, securing them with rope or bricks. The streets begin to look like a fleet of strange, slumbering beasts, each one bundled up against the night. The effect is surreal and deeply poignant. These makeshift car covers are a tangible expression of the city's fear. They are a form of practical magic, a modern -day amulet against an invisible evil. No one really knows if a blanket can stop radioactive fallout or high frequency sonar waves, but doing something feels infinitely better than doing nothing. It's an assertion of agency in the face of overwhelming helplessness. The ingenuity is remarkable. Some people use thick layers of newspaper, hoping the printed words might form some kind of intellectual barrier against the assault. Others, who have a bit of money, go to army surplus stores and buy heavy military tarpaulins, believing that something designed for the army must offer superior protection. Each covered car is a personal statement, a testament to its owner's level of anxiety and resourcefulness. This behavior is a classic response in times of plague and pestilence throughout history. During the Black Death in medieval Europe, people would carry pouches of sweet smelling herbs called pomander, believing the pleasant aroma could ward off the bad air or miasma that they thought carried the disease. They would burn incense under church bells, all in an effort to purify the air and drive away the sickness. The citizens of Seattle, with their blankets and cardboard, are engaged in the 20th century equivalent of carrying a pomander. They are fighting a scientific mystery with folk remedies. A little known cultural artifact from this period is the rise of the car cover as a commercial product. While basic dust covers existed, the idea of a heavy duty, all with a protective cover for daily use, wasn't really a mainstream concept. The Seattle epidemic, in a small way, might have been a catalyst for this market, demonstrating a widespread consumer desire to swaddle and protect the increasingly valuable and symbolic automobile. It's a niche but interesting example of how a social panic can spur commercial innovation. The academic debate here centers on the psychology of these ritualistic behaviors. Are they purely for the individual's peace of mind, a way to feel in control, or do they serve a social function? Some sociologists argue that covering your car becomes a signal to your neighbors. It says, "I am taking this threat seriously. I am one of you. I am a concerned and responsible member of this community." In a neighborhood where every other car is covered, leaving your own vehicle exposed might be seen as a sign of recklessness or, even worse, a denial of the shared reality. The act of covering the car is a performance of civic anxiety. The phenomenon creates a new kind of neighborhood watch. People become vigilant not just about their own cars, but about the protective measures of others. "Did you see the new tarp the Johnsons got?" Someone might whisper over the fence. "It looks like the real deal." A subtle social pressure builds to participate in the ritual. You find yourself doing it, too. You feel a bit foolish as you unfold an old wool blanket and spread it out of the hood of your Chevrolet. But, as you do, a small part of your anxiety genuinely subsides. You've taken action. You've built a flimsy, temporary fortress against the unknown. When you look out your window before going to bed, the sight of your bundled up car, along with all the other bundled up cars on your street, provides a strange sort of comfort. It's a comfort born of shared vulnerability and collective action, however irrational. But the ritual also has a dark side. Every morning, there's the moment of truth, the unveiling. You go outside, your heart beating a little faster, and pull back the cover. You then perform the daily inspection, leaning in close, searching for any new pits that might have formed through your makeshift shield. If you find one, the sense of dread is magnified tenfold. The enemy is so powerful it can penetrate even a heavy blanket. If you don't find one, you're filled with a temporary sense of relief, convinced that your defense was successful. Either way, the ritual feeds the cycle of fear and vigilance. The city is trapped in a loop, covering and uncovering its cause, each day a new test in its ongoing war against a phantom. The collective imagination of the city, already stretched to its limits by theories of atomic fleas and military sonar, was about to take its most spectacular leap into the absurd, with the authorities offering no credible answers and the H-bomb theory reaching a kind of terrifying plateau. A vacuum of novelty was created. The panic needed a new, even more outlandish explanation to sustain its momentum. And the 1952, a decade obsessed with the future and the unknown, was more than ready to provide one. The culprit, some began to whisper, was not from Earth at all. The idea begins, as these things often do, on the fringes. Perhaps it's a caller to a late-night radio show, or a letter to the editor of a local counter-culture newspaper. Has anyone considered? The voice of the new theory might say that this isn't from any human source. The suggestion hangs in the air, electric with possibility. The 1952 was the golden age of the UFO. The modern era of flying saucer sightings had kicked off in 1947, not coincidentally, right there in Washington state, when a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 shiny, crescent-shaped objects flying at incredible speed near Mount Rainier. His description of their movement, like a saucer if you skip it across the water, gave the phenomenon its popular name. Since then, the skies of America had been filled with mysterious lights and strange craft. UFOs were a national obsession, a modern mythology in the making. This obsession was fueled by the Cold War. The idea of silent, mysterious objects monitoring us from above resonated deeply in a society paranoid about surveillance and sudden attack. Were they secret Soviet spy planes? Or were they something else entirely? Books like Donald Keyhoe's The Flying Saucers are real were bestsellers. Films like The Day the Earth Stood Still 1951 and The War of the Worlds 1953 were box office hits, tapping into the dual fantasy of benevolent visitors and hostile invaders. So when the windshield pitting mystery defied all earthly explanations, it was almost inevitable that people would start looking up. The theory that emerges is wonderfully creative in its paranoia. The pits are not from fallout or pollution. They are the result of a new, invisible weapon being tested by extraterrestrials. Or perhaps they are not a weapon at all, but a byproduct of their propulsion system. Or maybe, in the most chilling version of the theory, they're a form of microscopic alien egg, an attempt to seed the planet with a new life form. This new theory, as wild as it sounds, actually provides a strange kind of comfort. If the attackers are all powerful aliens, then the helplessness of the police and the mayor makes perfect sense. Of course they can't stop it. This explanation is, in its own way, less frightening than the H-bomb theory. Nuclear fallout means you are being poisoned by your own government, by human folly. An alien attack is an act of nature, like a hurricane or an earthquake. It's terrifying, but it's external, impersonal. It absolves humanity of its self-destructive tendencies. Another, related theory that bubbles up from the well of public anxiety involves cosmic rays. This was an era of burgeoning space science. People were aware of the concept of strange energies and particles bombarding the Earth from distant galaxies. A local amateur astronomer might get quoted in the paper, speculating that a recent solar flare or a shift in the Earth's magnetic field could be concentrating cosmic rays over the Puget Sound region, causing them to etch glass. This, like the sonar theory, is pure technobabble, using a real scientific concept, cosmic rays, as the basis for a completely fantastical conclusion. One of the more obscure, but real, scientific endeavors of the time was Project Mogul. This was a top-secret U.S. Army Air Forces project involving high-altitude balloons designed to detect Soviet atomic bomb tests by listening for the sound waves. It was the crash of one of these Project Mogul balloons in 1947 that created the infamous Roswell incident. The government's need for secrecy around projects like this directly fueled the public's belief in cover-ups and conspiracies. The less the government said, the more the public believed it was hiding something, and something was very often assumed to be extraterrestrial. The academic question here is about the function of such extreme beliefs. Why does a society need to invent alien invaders to explain a mundane phenomenon? Some historians argue that it's a form of societal stress-release. By creating a narrative that is so over the top, so fantastical, it allows people to process their very real anxieties about the bomb, about the government in a safer, fictionalized context. It's easier to worry about flying saucers than it is to contemplate the reality of thermonuclear war. You probably don't fully subscribe to the alien theory yourself. It feels like a step too far. But you hear it, you read about it, and it becomes part of the general atmosphere of weirdness. It contributes to the feeling that the normal rules of reality have been suspended. The world has become a place where anything is possible. When you look at the pits on your or your neighbor's windshield now, your mind has a whole menu of potential culprits to choose from: atomic fleas, industrial pollution, military sonar, H-bomb fallout, or cosmic rays from an alien spaceship. The mystery has officially entered its high-concept science-fiction phase. The city of Seattle isn't just panicked anymore, it's starring in its own B-movie. And no one knows how it's going to end. The situation in Seattle has become untenable. The city is gripped by a multifaceted C-4- panic. The local authorities, the mayor and the police chief, have tried to intervene, and their failures have only made the situation worse. The economy is being distorted by Iran on auto glass. People are wrapping their cars in blankets and speculating about death rays from Mars. The story of the Phantom Pitter of Seattle is no longer a local curiosity. It's making national news, and the city is becoming a laughingstock for the state-level government in Olympia. It's a major embarrassment and a growing civil concern. The governor of Washington at the time is a man named Arthur B. Langley, HES, a former mayor of Seattle himself. A 3-term governor who understands the city's character and its politics intimately. He's been watching the situation escalate from the state capital with growing alarm. He sees a city that is losing its grip. Populace tormenting itself with wild, unsubstantiated fears. He recognizes that local leadership has lost control of the narrative and that a higher authority is needed to break the cycle of panic. Governor Langley decides that the only way to end the madness is to replace speculation with science. He understands that you can't fight a delusion with a press release. You have to fight it with indisputable, empirical evidence. The public has lost faith in politicians and police officers. The only group that might still command enough respect and authority to be believed is the scientific community. He picks up the phone and makes a call to the most prestigious scientific institution in the state, the University of Washington. UW, as it's known locally, is a respected center of research and learning. The governor's request is simple and direct. He wants the university to assemble a team of its best scientists to conduct a thorough, impartial, and definitive investigation into the cause of the windshield pitting epidemic. He promises them the full backing and resources of the state government. This is a pivotal moment. The responsibility for solving the mystery is officially lifted from the shoulders of the overwhelmed local officials and placed into the hands of men of science. It's a classic trope when all else fails. Call in the experts. The announcement that the governor has commissioned a blue-ribbon scientific panel has an immediate, albeit subtle, effect on the city's mood. It doesn't end the panic overnight, but it offers a glimmer of hope. It's the promise of a real answer. The creation of government-sponsored scientific panels to solve pressing national problems was a hallmark of the post-war era. The success of the Manhattan Project, which brought together the nation's top physicists to build the atomic bomb, had created a powerful new model for state-sponsored big science. The idea was that any problem, no matter how complex, could be solved if you just threw enough brainpower and resources at it. This belief in the technocratic solution was a core component of Cold War ideology. A little-known fact that adds a layer of irony to this situation is the university's own involvement in Cold War research. Like many major American universities at the time, the University of Washington received significant funding from the Department of Defense for various research projects, some of them classified. So while the public was spinning conspiracy theories about secret military operations, the very institution being called in to debunk the hysteria was, in its own way, a part of the vast military-industrial-academic complex that was fueling the era's anxieties. The academic debate here focuses on the role of epistemic authority, or, more simply, who gets to be believed. In 1954 Seattle, the epistemic authority of politicians and law enforcement had collapsed. The governor's move was an attempt to transfer that authority to the scientific community. Historians of science argue that this event is a fascinating case study in how society turns to scientists not just for technical solutions, but for cultural reassurance. The scientists weren't just being asked to analyze glass. They were being asked to restore order and rationality to a city that had lost its way. The public reaction to the news is cautiously optimistic. The newspapers praise the governor's decisive action. Even the most ardent conspiracy theorists are forced to pause. It's one thing to accuse a politician of a cover minus up. It's another thing to preemptively dismiss the findings of a team of university physicists and chemists. The scientists are seen as impartial, above the political fray. They deal in facts, not opinions. For you, the news brings a sense of profound relief. After weeks of living in a world of rumor and fear, the promise of a definitive, scientific answer feels like a lifeline. You, and the rest of the city, are now waiting for the men in the white lab coats to arrive. They are the cavalry. They are the Ghostbusters. They are expected to march into the heart of the mystery, armed with microscopes and reason, and emerge with the truth. There is a palpable sense of anticipation. The city holds its breath. The daily ritual of inspecting and uncovering windshields continues. But it's now tinged with a new feeling, the knowledge that this period of madness might finally have an end date. The governor's phone call has set in motion the final act of the drama. The stage is set for the ultimate confrontation, the city's collective delusion versus the cold, hard light of scientific inquiry. The cavalry arrives, not on horseback, but in sensible sedans, carrying briefcases instead of carbines. The team assembled by the University of Washington is a formidable group. It includes Drive, J. Goodspeed, a geology professor, Dr. I. Kim Coldhouse, a renowned chemist, and, most importantly, the head of the laboratory, a physicist named Dr. P. L. Curl. These are not wild minor-side inventors or media personalities. They are serious, methodical men of science, the living embodiment of the calm, rational approach that the city so desperately needs. Their arrival on the scene immediately changes the atmosphere. Where police officers had been met with suspicion, the scientists are greeted with a kind of reverent curiosity. They set up a temporary base of operations, a laboratory at the State Patrol headquarters. Their mission is clear and has two parts. First, they need to collect and analyze samples of the pitted glass. Second, and just as importantly, they need to examine the supposed causes of the dust. The mysterious residues that people claim are responsible for the damage. The scientists go to work with a quiet, systematic efficiency that is itself a form of reassurance. They begin by collecting samples from cars all over the city. You might see them in a parking lot downtown, dressed in suits and ties, carefully removing a damaged windshield and crating it up for transport. They are meticulous. They label everything. They take detailed notes on the location of the car, the direction it was facing, and the atmospheric conditions. They also set up collection stations to gather samples of what's in the air. They place sticky slides on rooftops and in open fields, designed to capture any particulate matter that might be falling from the sky. They scrape residue from the hoods of cars that have been reported as having been hit overnight. They are building a library of evidence, a comprehensive physical record of the phenomenon. This methodical approach is a stark contrast to the wild, anecdotal evidence that has been fueling the panic, where a frantic citizen sees a new pit that appeared right before my eyes. The scientist sees a data point that needs to be verified and contextualized. They are immune to the emotional contagion of the panic because their training is all about separating observation from interpretation. One of the interesting, unless minus dramatized, aspects of a scientific investigation like this is the sheer tedium of it. It's not a series of eureka moments. It's hours and hours of painstaking, repetitive work in a laboratory. It's calibrating instruments, preparing slides, and staring through a microscope until your eyes hurt. The magic of science is in its rigorous, often boring, methodology. This is something that popular depictions of science, then and now, often miss. A peculiar historical footnote from this era is the public's fascination with the scientific detective. Characters like Craig Kennedy, a fictional professor at Columbia University who used his knowledge of chemistry and physics to solve crimes, were popular in pulp magazines and early films. This character embodied the idea that science could solve any mystery, no matter how baffling. The arrival of the UW scientists in Seattle was like a real minus life chapter from one of these stories. They were the scientific detectives, and the city was their crime scene. The academic debate about this phase of the epidemic revolves around the concept of the placebo effect on a societal scale. Did the mere presence of the scientists begin to calm the city down, even before they had produced any results? The evidence suggests it did. The rate of new reports to the police started to decline slightly as soon as the investigation was announced. Just knowing that a process was underway, that rational minds were on the case, was enough to start dissipating the psychic energy of the panic. The investigation itself was a form of therapy for the city. As the scientists work, a new kind of narrative begins to form. People are still anxious, but their anxiety is now focused on the outcome of the investigation. "I can't wait to see what the university finds," becomes the new refrain, replacing the frantic speculation about H-bombs and aliens. The city has collectively outsourced its anxiety to the scientific panel. You feel this shift yourself. You still worry about your car, but the fear is less immediate, less overwhelming. There is a sense that an answer is coming, and that the answer will be final. You watch the news reports showing the scientists at work, and you feel a sense of civic pride. This is how a modern, sensible city solves a problem. It doesn't give in to fear. It calls in the experts. Of course, there are still holdouts. There are those who are convinced that the scientists will be co-opted, that they will become part of the government cover-up. But for the most part, the city places its faith in the lab coats. They wait, with a strange mixture of hope and trepidation, for the verdict. The scientists are in their lab, poring over the physical evidence, preparing to hold up the city's fears to the cold, unforgiving light of the microscope. The truth is coming, whether the city is ready for it or not. The heart of the investigation is the laboratory, a space of quiet concentration that stands in stark opposition to the noisy chaos of the city's streets and airwaves. Here, under the bright, steady glow of fluorescent lights, the physical evidence of the panic is subjected to the unblinking gaze of scientific instruments. This is where the narrative of fear collides with the reality of physics and chemistry. Dr. Paul and his team take the collected windshields and place them under powerful microscopes. They are not just glancing at them. They are conducting a detailed forensic analysis. They are looking at the size, shape, and characteristics of the pits. They are searching for any foreign materials, any chemical residues, any hint of what might have caused them. You can imagine the scene. A scientist leans over a microscope, his brow furrowed in concentration. He adjusts the focus, and a single, tiny pit on a piece of glass fills his entire field of vision. It looks like a crater on the moon, a microscopic impact zone. He and his colleagues spend hours doing this, examining hundreds of these pits from dozens of different cars. They are looking for a pattern, a signature, something that distinguishes these epidemic pits from ordinary, everyday damage. At the same time, the chemists on the team are analyzing the various residues that have been collected. They test the scrapings taken from car hoods. They analyze the particulate matter captured on the sticky slides. They are looking for the telltale signs of the suspected culprits. Is there any unusual radioactivity? They bring in a Geiger counter, the iconic tool of the atomic age, and wave it over the samples. The device remains stubbornly, disappointingly silent. There is no radiation. The H-bomb theory, the great ghost that has haunted the city, is the first to be quietly, unceremoniously debunked in the sterile environment of the lab. They test for acidity. They test for alkalinity. They run a battery of chemical analyses, searching for any unusual compounds, any trace of industrial pollutants, any sign of the corrosive agent from the mythical sun fleas. They find nothing. The dust and grime they analyze are a completely ordinary cocktail of urban soot, pollen, and minerals. There is nothing exotic, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that could possibly be pitching glass. This process of elimination is the backbone of the scientific method. The scientists are not just trying to prove what the cause is. They are, more importantly, proving what it isn't. With each negative result, the world of fantastical possibilities shrinks. The sonar waves, the cosmic rays, the alien eggs, all these theories, which require some kind of physical residue or energy signature, are failing the test of empirical verification. A little minus known aspect of material science is the study of fracture grotti, the analysis of fracture surfaces. Even in the 1950 seconds, scientists could tell a lot about how a material like glass broke or chipped by examining the fracture patterns under a microscope. A high minus velocity impact creates a different kind of mark than a low minus velocity one. A chemical corrosion leaves a different signature than a thermal shock. The scientists in the UW lab are, in essence, reading the story written in the glass. And the story the glass is telling them is not one of a mysterious new plague. The atmosphere in the lab is likely one of growing certainty, mixed with a kind of professional sympathy. The scientists can see what is happening. They are gathering overwhelming evidence that the entire panic is based on a misunderstanding. The pits they are examining so carefully are not new or mysterious at all. They are completely consistent with the kind of small minus scale impact damage that cars sustain every single day from tiny particles kicked up from the road surface. The academic debate here is a subtle one. Did the scientists know the answer almost immediately? Or was there a genuine process of discovery? Most historians of the event believe the former. Any experienced physicist or chemist would likely have recognized the phenomenon for what it was very quickly. The purpose of the elaborate, weak minus long investigation was not just to find the truth, which was likely already suspected, but to build an unassailably thorough case. They needed to be able to stand before the public and not just state their conclusion, but demonstrate, beyond any shadow of a doubt, how they arrived at it. They were not just doing science. They were preparing a legal and psychological argument to present to the jury of a panicked city. As you go about your day, you are unaware of the quiet refutations happening in the lab. You are still living in a world of profound mystery, but the gears of science are turning. The evidence is accumulating. The microscope and the chemical tests are systematically dismantling the city's fears. One by one, the scientists are seeing the truth with perfect clarity. The pits are not a message from space or a curse from the atom. They are simply the scars of ordinary life, the mundane graffiti of the open road. The problem now is how to deliver that profoundly anticlimactic news to a city that is expecting a revelation. After days of painstaking analysis in the lab, the scientific team is ready to present its findings. But they don't just issue a dry press release. They understand the theatricality of the moment. They know they need to manage the public's expectations and deliver the news in a way that is both authoritative and digestible. They release a preliminary report, a sort of trial balloon to prepare the city for the final, more detailed conclusion. The initial report is delivered to the mayor's office and quickly disseminated to the press. The key finding is stated in careful, deliberate, and deeply unsatisfying language. After examining all the evidence, the scientists have concluded that the pitting phenomenon is not the result of any single, new, or mysterious cause. They have found no evidence of fallout, no unusual industrial pollutants, and no phantom pitter. The damage, they state, is the result of normal, everyday driving conditions. The city lets out a collective, confused, and angry huh? This is not the answer anyone wanted. It's not the answer anyone was expecting. After weeks of high drama, of H- bombs and alien invaders, of police surrenders and citizen posses, the explanation is nothing, just boring old rocks hitting boring old glass. It feels like a joke. It feels like an insult. The public's reaction is one of widespread disbelief and denial. I don't buy it, is the common refrain you hear on the street and from your neighbors. I've been driving for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this before. The sentiment is understandable. People have a powerful emotional investment in the reality of the crisis. They have spent weeks being afraid, angry, and vigilant. They have wrapped their cars in blankets and spent good money on new windshields. To be told now that it was all a misunderstanding, that the damage was there all along and they just never noticed it, is deeply invalidating. It suggests that they were foolish, suggestible, and hysterical, and nobody likes to be told they're hysterical. This moment highlights a powerful psychological principle known as belief perseverance. Once a person has adopted a strong belief, they are highly resistant to changing it, even in the face of overwhelming contradictory evidence. In fact, sometimes, presenting contradictory evidence can make them cling to their original belief even more tightly. This is because the belief is not just an intellectual opinion, it has become part of their identity, their worldview. To abandon the belief would be to admit they were profoundly wrong. The scientists' preliminary report is treated by many as the final piece of the conspiracy. See? The hardcore believers say, they were but off. The government got to them. This is exactly what we expected them to say. The report, which was intended to be the beginning of the end of the panic, instead becomes just another piece of evidence to be interpreted through the lens of the existing delusion. A strange but relevant historical parallel is the Great Moon Hoax of 1835. A New York newspaper, The Sun, published a series of articles claiming that a famous astronomer had discovered life on the moon, including bat-like humanoids and blue unicorns. The story was a complete fabrication, but it was a massive sensation. Even after the paper admitted it was a hoax, many people refused to believe it, preferring the fantastic story to the mundane truth. They were more invested in the wonder of the story than in its factuality. The people of Seattle in 1954 were in a similar position. The story of the Phantom Pitter was, in its own terrifying way, more exciting than the truth. The academic debate used nuanced. Was the scientists' communication strategy flawed? Should they have released their findings differently, perhaps in a more gradual, educational way? Or was this backlash simply an unavoidable stage in the grieving process for a collective delusion? Many sociologists argue for the latter. The city had to go through a phase of denial before it could reach acceptance. The initial rejection of the scientific findings was a necessary, if painful, part of the process of waking up. In the days following the preliminary report, the city exists in a state of cognitive dissonance. The highest authority science has spoken, but the population is not ready to listen. The radio coal miners in shows are on fire with angry citizens dissecting the report and pointing out its flaws. If it's just normal road damage, one caller might demand, then why did it start all of a sudden? And why is it happening to my house windows? These are good questions, born of genuine confusion. The preliminary report had delivered the what, but it hadn't yet fully explained the why. You are caught in this limbo yourself. Your logical mind tells you that the scientists are probably right. It makes a certain kind of sense. But your gut, conditioned by weeks of fear and social reinforcement, is skeptical. You look at the pits on your neighbor's car and you still feel a flicker of the old dread. The city has been given the cure, but it's refusing to take the medicine. The fever of the panic has not yet broken. It will take one final, definitive push to bring the city back to reality. The scientists' preliminary report left a crucial question unanswered. A question that echoed in the confused and angry conversations across the city if the pits were always there. Why did we all start seeing them at the exact same time? It's a powerful and logical question, and without a satisfying answer, the normal road damage theory feels incomplete and unconvincing. To understand the final piece of the puzzle, we have to move out of the physics lab and into the far stranger territory of the human mind. We need to talk about how your brain constructs reality, and how easily the process can be hijacked. Imagine you're at a loud party. Music is blasting. Dozens of people are talking at once. The sound is a chaotic wall of noise. Yet, if someone across the room says your name, you will likely hear it. Your brain, in that moment, performs a miracle. It's constantly monitoring all the auditory input, but it knows to prioritize certain sounds. It can pick your name, a signal of personal relevance, out of the cacophony. This is sometimes called the cocktail party effect. What happened in Seattle was a city-wide version of this phenomenon. But for your eyes, for your entire driving life, the tiny pits and specks on your windshield were just background noise. Irrelevant data that your brain automatically filtered out. It wasn't important, so you didn't see it. The news reports began. The radio announcers, the newspaper headlines, your neighbors, they all, in effect, started whispering pits into the city's collective ear. Your brain was given a new instruction: pits are now important. Start looking for them. Once your brain had that instruction, it couldn't stop. It began to actively scan for the pits, pulling them from the background noise and presenting them to your conscious attention. The pits hadn't suddenly appeared on the glass, they had suddenly appeared in your awareness. This is a psychological phenomenon known as selective attention or attentional bias. You see what you are primed to see. Think about it in a different context. If you decide to buy a red car, you suddenly start seeing red cars everywhere. The number of red cars on the road hasn't increased. Your attention has simply been tuned to that specific frequency. The entire city of Seattle had its frequency tuned to windshield damage. This explains why the phenomenon seemed to spread like a contagion. As the news spread from Bellingham south to Seattle, it was priming each community, one by one. The epidemic wasn't a physical thing moving through the air. It was an idea moving through the social network, activating the same perceptual bias in thousands of individual brains. This brings us to the even stranger question of why people reported seeing pits form spontaneously. This is where selective attention combines with another cognitive quirk: confirmation bias. Your brain wants to prove its beliefs are correct. If you believe, with every fiber of your being, that a mysterious force is creating new pits, your brain will work very hard to find evidence to support that belief. When you stare intently at a windshield, a complex surface of glass, light, and reflection, your eyes and brain are processing a huge amount of visual information. You will inevitably see flickers of light, minor distortions, or even floaters from within your own eye. Normally, you'd ignore these, but, in the context of the panic, your brain, eager to confirm your fear, might interpret one of these random visual events as the formation of a new pit. It's not a conscious lie, it's a genuine perceptual error. A misinterpretation of ambiguous data to fit a pre-existing narrative. The academic world has long been fascinated by these collective psychological events. They are not as rare as you might think. From the dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg, where hundreds of people danced uncontrollably for days, to more modern cases of mysterious illnesses spreading through schools with no discernible physical cause. History is filled with examples of mass psychogenic illness. The Seattle Windshield Epidemic is now considered a textbook case, a perfect, non-threatening example of how a collective delusion can take hold of a modern, educated population. The debate continues about the exact terminology: is it mass hysteria, collective delusion, or mass psychogenic illness? But the underlying mechanism is the same. The strange thing is, you are susceptible to these biases every single day. They are not a sign of madness or stupidity. They are a fundamental part of how your brain works. They are mental shortcuts that help you navigate a complex world, but sometimes they lead you down the wrong path. The story of Seattle is a powerful reminder that seeing is believing is often the wrong way around. In many cases, believing is seeing. The city of Seattle didn't have a windshield problem. It had a software problem. The hardware, the glass, was fine. The perceptual software running in the minds of its citizens had been infected with a virus of fear. The preliminary report was the appetizer. Now, it's time for the main course. On a Tuesday in late April, just as the panic is beginning to fray around the edges from sheer exhaustion, the University of Washington scientific panel, in conjunction with the mayor's office, releases its final, comprehensive report. This isn't just a quiet memo. It's a public event, a deliberate and decisive act designed to be the final word on the matter. The report is a masterpiece of calm, scientific authority. It's several pages long, detailing the full scope of the investigation. It lays out, step by step, what the scientists did, what they tested for, and what they found. It reads like a methodical dismantling of every single fear that has gripped the city for the past 3 weeks. The report states definitively that their Geiger counters found no trace of radioactivity above normal background levels. The H-bomb theory is officially, scientifically dead. It confirms they found no unusual chemical agents, no acids, no alkalis, no mysterious organic compounds. The sand flea and industrial pollution theories are likewise put to rest. They found no evidence of any kind of projectile, explosive, or directed energy. Then, the report delivers the final, simple, and for many, infuriating conclusion. The pitting is, and always has been, the result of one thing: tiny, hard particles, primarily from coal ash and fine gravel, being kicked up from the road surface by moving vehicles. It's a phenomenon as old as the automobile itself. The scientists even give it a name: normal road film damage. But this time, they don't just state the conclusion, they explain the why. They explain the psychology. The report gently but firmly points out that this kind of minor damage accumulates on every car. It notes that the public's attention was focused by the original news stories from the northern part of the state. It explains that once people started looking for the pits, they inevitably found them. They are, in the report's dry, scientific language, discoveries, not damages. To drive the point home with an elegant, almost poetic, piece of scientific showmanship, the scientists reveal a key part of their experiment. Early in their investigation, they had secretly taken a brand-new, perfectly pristine sheet of automotive safety glass and placed it in a secure, protected location in downtown Seattle. They left it there for a week, exposed to the same air and atmospheric conditions as all the cars in the city. When they examined this control glass under the microscope, it was still perfect. Not a single pit. This simple, brilliant control experiment proved, beyond any doubt, that nothing was falling from the sky. Nothing was attacking stationary objects. The damage was happening, and could only be happening, on the road. This final report is a crucial moment in the history of science communication. The scientists didn't just present data, they told a story. They anticipated the public's objections and addressed them head-on. The inclusion of the psychological explanation was key. It gave people a way to understand their own experience without feeling foolish. It wasn't that you were crazy. It was that your brain, like everyone else's, had been tricked by a powerful illusion. A little minus known but fascinating detail is how newspapers around the country covered this final report. While Seattle papers reported it as the solution to a local crisis, papers in other cities often ran it as a quirky, weird news item. A headline in a New York paper might read something like, "Seattle's Phantom Pitter, just plain old dirt." This national coverage, which often had a slightly mocking tone, was likely a factor in helping the local population finally accept the truth. It's one thing to be in a panic with your neighbors. It's another to realize the rest of the country is laughing at you. The academic debate about the report's effectiveness is largely settled. It is considered a model of how to de-escalate a mass psychogenic event by providing a clear, comprehensive, and scientifically unimpeachable explanation, while also offering an unjudgmental psychological out for the public. The report successfully broke the fever. It didn't just provide an answer. It provided a narrative reset. As the details of the final report spread through the city via radio and the evening newspapers, you can feel the air finally, truly change. The tension that has held the city in its grip for weeks begins to dissolve. There is no single, dramatic moment of realization, but rather a slow, collective exhale. The Great Seattle Windshield Pitting Epidemic, a phenomenon born of fear and rumor, is about to be officially declared over, killed by a lethal dose of mundane reality. The truth, it turns out, is not out there. It's been right here, on the gritty asphalt of the road, all alone. The morning after the final report is published feels different. The air is still misty. The ferry horn still echoes across the bay, but the psychic weather has cleared. A strange and profound quiet has descended upon the city. The panic has not just stopped, it has evaporated, leaving behind a faint, lingering awkwardness, like the silence after a heated argument. You walk out of your house, and the first thing you notice is the change in the streetscape. The bundled minus-up cars are gone. Your neighbor Frank's Ford is sitting there, its windshield naked to the morning light for the first time in weeks. He catches your eye as he's leaving for work. He gives you a tight little smile and a nod. You nod back. Nothing is said. Nothing needs to be said. An unspoken, city-wide agreement has been made to never, ever speak of this again. The city is experiencing a collective hangover. There's a sense of embarrassment, a mild, shared shame. People had allowed themselves to be swept up in a frenzy, to believe in atomic fleas and daily undeath rays. They had accused the government of vast conspiracies. They had overwhelmed the police with frantic calls, and it was all over. Nothing. The contrast between the intensity of the fear and the mundanity of the cause is almost too embarrassing to contemplate. The radio news is the most telling sign. The windshield pitting epidemic, which had been the lead story for weeks, has vanished. The announcers are back to talking about city councils owning disputes in the weather. It's as if the past 3 weeks never happened. The media, which played such a crucial role in amplifying the panic, is now playing an equally crucial role in burying it. They dropped the story completely, allowing the city to move on without dwelling on its recent collective folly. This sudden, silent end is a common feature of mass hysterical events. They don't wind down, they snap. Once the central belief is definitively broken, the entire structure of the delusion collapses instantly. The energy that sustained it is gone, and people are left blinking in the sudden light of normal reality, wondering what all the fuss was about. At the auto glass shops, the phones fall silent, the long waiting lists disappear. A few people, who had appointments scheduled, call to sheepishly cancel them. The owners are left with a massive overstock of windshields and a great story to tell their grandchildren. The brief, inexplicable boom is over. A fascinating, and rarely discussed, consequence of such events is the backlash against the victim. In the immediate aftermath, there's sometimes a tendency to blame the people who were most vocal during the panic. A person who had loudly insisted on the H-bomb theory might find themselves being teased or ostracized at work. This is a way for the community to distance itself from the craziness, to project the foolishness onto a few individuals rather than accept it as a collective failure of rationality. It's a way of saying, we weren't all panicking. Just those people. The academic debate about the long-term impact of the event on Seattle is interesting. Did it leave a permanent scar on the city's psyche, or was it so effectively forgotten that it had no lasting effect at all? The consensus leans towards the latter. The event was so strange, so specific, and so embarrassing that it was quickly repressed from the city's collective memory. It didn't become a source of civic identity or a cautionary tale passed down through generations. It became a historical oddity, a footnote. It wasn't until decades later that sociologists and historians rediscovered it and recognized its value as a perfect case study. You go about your day, and the world feels intensely, wonderfully normal. The simple act of driving to work without anxiously scanning your windshield for new damage feels like a liberation. The city has been through a fever dream, and now it has woken up. The experience has left you with a new, slightly unsettling understanding of the world. You've seen firsthand how thin the veneer of rationality can be, how easily a community can be swayed by fear, and how powerful a shared story, even a false one, can be. That evening, you might pick up the paper and see a small article, buried on an inside page, about the scientists' final report. It's treated as old news already. You fold the paper and put it aside. The silence from your neighbors is not just about embarrassment. It's about a shared need to reclaim the ordinary. The city has stared into a strange, distorted mirror for 3 weeks, and it did not like what it saw. No. Everyone just wants to forget. The great Seattle Windshield Pitting Epidemic is over. It died not with a bang, but with a quiet, collective blush. A week or so has passed since the great silence fell. The city has returned to its normal rhythms. The memory of the panic is already starting to feel distant and surreal. Like a half-minus remembered dream. Life has gone on, but something inside you has changed. Your relationship with the physical world, and specifically with your car, will never be quite the same. One quiet evening, you find yourself drawn back to your Chevrolet. You walk out into the cool, damp air, not with the frantic anxiety of the epidemic, but with a new kind of calm, scientific curiosity. You want to see the pits again, to look at them with the new knowledge you possess. You want to see them for what they are, not for what you feared they were. You lean in close to the windshield, just as you did that first Saturday morning that feels like a lifetime ago. You angle your head to catch the glare from the porch light. And there they are. Of course they are. They never left. They are scattered across the glass, a constellation of tiny, insignificant scars. But now, you see them differently. The fear is gone. You are no longer looking at evidence of an attack. You are looking at a story. You can almost see the tiny pieces of gravel and ash kicked up by the truck in front of you on the highway last year, making their small mark. Each pit is a memory of a journey, a microscopic record of miles traveled. It's the normal, unavoidable price of moving through the world. The damage is not a sign of a mysterious new threat, but a testament to the car's history, to its life on the road. You run your finger over the surface, feeling the slight indentations. You are no longer a victim. You are an observer, a geologist examining the surface of a familiar planet. You have been given a new way of seeing, a lesson in perception. You now understand that your brain filtered these marks out for years. Then it was trained to see them. And now, you can choose how to see them. You can choose to ignore them again, or you can choose to see them for what they are. This is a small but profound form of power. You glance down the street. The other cars are parked peacefully, their windshields glinting in the street or twilight. Each one of them carries the same collection of tiny scars. Each one tells the same story. The thing that had made you feel so uniquely targeted and vulnerable is, in fact, the most common, ordinary thing in the world. The great mystery that had united the city in fear was, in fact, a shared experience that had been hiding in plain sight all along. A strange and little minus known psychological after-minus effect of such events is a temporary state of hyper-minus rationality. Having been so thoroughly fooled by your own perceptions, you might find yourself questioning everything for a little while. You become more skeptical, more demanding of evidence. You might annoy your friends and family by dissecting their casual statements and looking for logical fallacies. This phase usually passes, but it's a sign that the experience has left a mark, an inoculation against future bouts of uncritical belief. The academic debate that continues to this day is about the trigger for the event. The scientific report explained what road damage and the how collective delusion, but it never definitively answered the why now. Why did people in Bellingham suddenly start noticing the pits in the spring of 1954? Was there a change in the composition of road materials? Was there a specific atmospheric condition that made them more visible? Or was it truly just a random, spontaneous cascade? A lightning strike of social psychology with no specific physical catalyst. This is the one small corner of the mystery that science could not fully illuminate, leaving a tiny space for wonder and speculation to remain. You straighten up, leaving the car and its tiny, harmless pits behind. You've been on a journey. Here's you. And the entire city of Seattle descended into a kind of madness. A shared hallucination painted on the canvas of your car windshields. You stared into the abyss of your own fears of the bomb, of the government, of the unknown. And then, you were pulled back by the steady, patient hand of reason. The experience was terrifying, absurd, and deeply embarrassing. But as you walk back toward your house, you realize it was also, in its own strange way, educational. You've learned something about fear, something about how communities work, and something deeply important about the fallibility of your own mind. You will probably never look through a piece of glass the same way again. You will always be aware of the tiny imperfections, the little bits of noise in the signal, but now you know that they are just part of the view. They are not the view itself. The story of the Seattle Windshield Pitting Epidemic fades from the headlines and the public conversation, but it doesn't vanish completely. It enters a new phase of its life. It ceases to be a current event and begins its slow transformation into a case study, a modern fable. It becomes a story that people tell not to scare each other, but to understand something about the human condition. In the years and decades that follow, the story becomes a favorite anecdote for sociologists, psychologists, and historians. It's taught in university classrooms as a perfect, self-contained example of mass psychogenic illness. It's a compelling lecture topic because it has all the elements of a great story: a mysterious phenomenon, rising panic, bizarre theories, and a clear, scientific resolution. Unlike so many historical events, it has a neat beginning, middle, and end. You can imagine a young college student in the 1972, sitting in a stuffy lecture hall, learning about the incident for the first time. For them, it's not a lived experience. It's a piece of data, an amusing and slightly baffling story from their parents' generation. They might laugh at the idea of atomic fleas and people wrapping their cars in blankets. It all seems so quaint, so irrational, a relic of a more naive and paranoid time. But the story's true power lies in its timelessness. It's a parable about the relationship between information, fear, and perception. And as the world moves beyond the 1952, the mechanisms that drove the Seattle panic don't disappear. They just change their clothes. Think about the information ecosystem of 1954. News traveled through a few relatively centralized channels, a handful of radio stations, a couple of major newspapers. It took 3 weeks for the panic to build, spread, and collapse. Now, imagine the same event happening today. A single, dramatic post on social media, complete with a compelling photo of a pitted windshield, could go viral in a matter of hours, reaching millions of people around the globe. The informational cascade that took weeks to build in Seattle could now be triggered in an afternoon. The theories wouldn't be about H-bombs or sonar. They would be about 5G signals, chemtrails, or a new kind of nanoparticle being tested by a secretive tech corporation. The specific fears change with the times, but the underlying structure of the paranoia remains the same. People would share evidence, form online communities of believers, and accuse the mainstream media and scientific institutions of a massive cover-up. The Seattle panic was an analog virus. Today, it would be a digital one, spreading with terrifying speed and efficiency. A little minus known but poignant coda to the story involves the individuals who were at the center of it. Mayor Alan Pomeroy and Police Chief H.J. Lawrence, the two men who tried and failed to control the narrative, found their careers forever linked to this bizarre episode. For a time, they were seen as the hapless officials who presided over a city that lost its mind. History, however, has been kinder to them. They are now generally seen as men who were confronted with an impossible, unprecedented situation and did their best to react with reason, even if their efforts backfired. Their stories become a lesson in the limits of leadership when faced with a crisis of public belief. The academic world continues to debate the finer points of the incident. Is mass hysteria an outdated and slightly sexist term? Should we prefer the more clinical mass psychogenic illness? How much of a role did the specific anxieties of the post-war, atomic-era Pacific Northwest play in the event? Could the same thing have happened in, say, Chicago or Atlanta? These questions ensure that the story remains a subject of active discussion and analysis, a puzzle that continues to offer new insights. As you get older, You might find yourself telling the story to your own children or grandchildren. Let me tell you about the time our whole city went crazy over nothing. You might begin, for you. It's not just an academic case study, it's a memory. You remember the feeling of genuine fear. You remember the sight of the blanket minus wrapped gauze. You remember the profound sense of relief when it was all over. You have become a keeper of the fable. The story serves as a personal reminder of how fragile our sense of reality can be. It's a cautionary tale about the danger of letting fear become your lens for viewing the world. The Windshields of 1954 were a blank screen onto which an entire city projected its deepest anxieties. The story's enduring legacy is its ability to act as a mirror, forcing every new generation that hears it to ask a simple, unsettling question: what are we all seeing today that isn't really there? And so, the story comes to a close. The panic subsides. The scientists go back to their university labs, and the city of Seattle moves on, eager to forget its brief, strange trip into collective delusion. The pits on the windshields remain, but they have been stripped of their power. They are no longer omens or symptoms. They are just pits, the mundane scars of an ordinary life. They are invisible once more. But what is the real mystery here? As you reflect on the whole bizarre episode, you realize the question was never really what is causing the pits. The pits were always just pits. The real, and far more profound, mystery was what caused the seeing. What was the invisible force that compels an entire, modern, educated city to suddenly focus its collective gaze on something it had ignored for decades? The answer, you now understand, is fear. Fear was the phantom pitter. Fear was the invisible agent that flew through the city. It was an emotional contagion, passed from person to person through worried conversations, amplified by breathless news reports, and given shape by the deep minus-seated anxieties of the age. The pits were just the physical host for this psychological virus. The H-bomb. The sonar. The aliens, they were all just masks that the fear wore to make itself seem more real. This story is a powerful illustration of a fundamental human truth. We do not see the world as it is. We see it as we are. Your perception is not a clear window onto reality. It's a complex and creative act, shaped by your beliefs, your emotions, and the stories you tell yourself. In the spring of 1954, the people of Seattle were afraid. They were living under the shadow of the bomb, in a world that felt increasingly complex and dangerous. And so, they saw a world that was under attack. Their collective fear physically reshaped their perception of reality. A fascinating final detail, a bit of trivia that encapsulates the whole affair, is that reports of pitting didn't just stop in Seattle after the scientific report. They continued to pop up sporadically in other towns and cities across the country for a short time. The news of the epidemic had planted the seed of the idea nationwide. For a few weeks, people in Portland or Spokane or Boise would read about the Seattle mystery, go out to their cars, look closely, and lo and behold find the pits. The delusion had its own brief, faint aftershocks, proving that the phenomenon wasn't unique to Seattle's water supply or air quality. It was unique to the human brain. The academic debate that will likely never be settled is the single patient zero question. Was there one person, one initial observer in Bellingham, whose genuine, idiosyncratic curiosity about their own windshield accidentally triggered the entire cascade? Or was it a spontaneous emergence? A case of several people noticing the same thing at roughly the same time. Like the origin of a folk tale, the precise birth moment of the panic is lost to history, which only adds to its power as a modern myth. You are left with this quiet, profound understanding. The real enemy was never outside. It wasn't in the sky, or in the sea, or in the emissions from a factory. The enemy was within. It was the human tendency to see patterns in randomness, to seek certainty in the face of ambiguity, and to let fear tell a more compelling story than reason. The windshield on your car is now, for you, a metaphor. It's a reminder that the world is always full of tiny, ignoble imperfections. Life is full of pits, but it is your choice whether to see them as just part of the journey, or to stare at them until they become the only thing you can see, blotting out the road ahead. The city of Seattle learned that lesson the hard way, in a strange, shared fever dream of glass and gravel. And now, you've learned it too. The phantom has been vanquished, not by a weapon or a shield, but by a simple change in perspective. And with that, the world, in all its beautifully imperfect, non-mindless threatening reality, comes back into focus. And so, our journey through the strange spring of 1954 comes to a gentle end. The story fades, like the evening light outside your window. The frantic voices on the radio fall silent, replaced now only by the soft hum of the fan, or the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. The city of Seattle, with its blanket-minus wrapped cars and its collective anxiety, dissolves back into the mists of time. You can let go of it now. Let the theories of atomic fleas and cosmic rays drift away like dandelion seeds on a soft breeze. Let the memory of the panic recede, becoming smaller and more distant. A tiny, interesting speck in the vast landscape of the past. You can feel a sense of calm settling over you, a quiet reassurance. The mystery is solved. The world, you are reminded, is mostly just ordinary, mostly just mundane. The things that seem so frightening and complex in the dead of night often reveal themselves to be simple and harmless in the clear light of day. Feel that sense of resolution wash over you, a gentle tide pulling the last remnants of worry out to a calm, quiet sea. Your mind is growing heavy now, your thoughts slowing down, becoming as soft and indistinct as clouds. You are drifting, floating in that peaceful space between wake-ups and Oz and sleep. The story is over. There are no more questions to answer, no more mysteries to solve. There is only this moment of quiet, of comfort, of slow descent into a deep and restorative rest. You are safe, you are comfortable, and the path into your dreams is clear. The end of the article. Good night.